Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's program, Proposals for Recruiting and Retaining the Best Teachers. Thank you all for coming. My name is Roberta Schaefer, and I'm the president of the Research Bureau. We'd like to express our gratitude to Assumption College for hosting today's event, and especially to the college's Department of Education and the Office of Career Services for being co-sponsors of this event. And as many of you know, the Research Bureau is now located at Assumption College. We're delighted about that, and this is one of what we hope will be many collaborative efforts with the college. Today's program is part of the Research Bureau's Francis Harrington Forums on Municipal Government. And we are grateful to our 2012 presenting sponsor, Commerce Bank, and our 2012 leadership sponsor, Polar Beverages. Today's event, the sponsor is Rand Whitney Container. The Research Bureau also wishes to express its appreciation to the Telegram and Gazette for advertising today's event, and the City of Worcester Government Channel, under the direction of Judy Warren, for videotaping it. And be sure to visit our website, where you can read and download all of the Research Bureau's reports, as well as announcements of upcoming events and highlights of past events. Quick reminder about some upcoming events that we're having. The next forum will be on May 2nd at 7:45 in the morning, and that's at the Mass College of Pharmacy downtown. And we're going to have an all-star cast who will discuss strategies for revitalizing downtowns. And then on May 30th at 4:30 in the afternoon is the Research Bureau's 27th annual meeting, and we're pleased to announce that Eric Rosengren, who's the president of the Boston Federal Reserve Bank, will be our featured speaker. Again, we want to thank our ever-growing list of sponsors for all of these events. It's now my pleasure to introduce the moderator for today's program, Kevin O'Sullivan. Kevin became a member of the Massachusetts Biomedical Initiatives team in 1998, and before being named president and CEO in 2003, he served as MBI's vice president for business development and operations. Previously, Kevin was vice president and director of marketing at the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce, where he developed and implemented a comprehensive marketing and public relations plan for the 4,000-member business organization. He also served as marketing director for the City of Worcester, where he was charged with the opening of the Worcester Centrum Center Convention Facility. As a member of the board of directors of the Worcester Business Development Corporation, he helped to develop the successful Massachusetts Biotechnology Research Park. He is also currently chair of the City of Worcester's License Commission. From 1986 to 1994, Kevin served in the Massachusetts House of Representatives, and while he was a member there, he chaired the Committee on Redistricting, he was the vice chair of Ethics, and he sat on the Ways and Means Committee. While he was in the legislature, he championed the biomedical industry and was co-sponsor in enacting the Emerging Technology Fund, the investment tax credit, and tax increment financing legislation. He's the former co-founder and chair of the Central Mass Legislative Caucus. Now, most importantly, Kevin was a founding member of the Research Bureau's Board of Directors, and he served for several years on our executive committee, the Long Range Planning Committee, and he's currently a member of our board. Kevin?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Roberta, and welcome everyone on this beautiful spring day in a beautiful facility that I guess we're one of the first users here at Assumption College. So we thank Assumption College. I think we also want to say that this event is presented along with Assumption College's Departments of Education and the Office of Career Services. And again, we can't forget our sponsors, Commerce Bank, Polar Beverages, and Rand Whitney. Thank you very much. Without their support, we would not be able to have programs such as this. As Roberta told you, with the proposals for recruiting and retaining the best teachers, I think we have the best panel here to talk about that subject, and they all offer a variety of points of view. 4 speakers today will speak for 10 minutes. We will then have an opportunity to kind of go back and forth with each other to learn more about the subject and to challenge and to discuss this very subject. So what I will do is basically quickly introduce in the order that you're going to go, and then I will get into each speaker as you go along to give you a little background on each. So number 1 will be Tony Ashton, who is the Managing Director, District and School Partnerships for Teach America. Our second speaker will be Jesse Solomon, who's the Executive Director of the Boston Teacher Residency Program. Third will be Eric Howell, the Associate Professor of Education here at Assumption College. And our cleanup will be Worcester's own Tracy O'Connell-Novick, who is Vice Chair and a member of our Worcester School Committee. So let me just start with Tony. Tony Ashton is the Managing Director of the District and School Partnerships for Teach for America. And he's responsible for leading growth strategy in Massachusetts. You can define that for us when you get up here and speak. He's worked in education for over 10 years as a teacher, administrator, and policy specialist. He worked as an accountability specialist with the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, the Charter School Office, where he helped to oversee accountability for charter schools all across Massachusetts. Tony graduated from the University of Southern California with an honors degree in public policy and management, and the Harvard Graduate School of Education with a master's in education policy and management as well. Please welcome Tony Ashton.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and just really want to say how honored I am to be here to talk about this important topic. I mean, on a professional level for my role with the organization, but just from a personal level, having been a Teach for America Corps member myself and just committed to recruiting and retaining excellent teachers for our public school systems across the country. I'd love to start off just really to give you a quick overview of what we do as an organization. And sort of break it down into a couple of different areas. And I apologize, I don't have a PowerPoint to walk us through, but I'll do my best without those materials. So Teach for America is an organization that's over 20 years old. We actually just had our 20th anniversary this past year, that is specifically focused on addressing the issue of the achievement gap in the United States. It's specifically focused on what that looks like in our low-income rural and urban cities across the country. And so we look at this as our nation's most pressing issue. Truly that education is the civil rights issue of our time, and that our solution to that is going to be focused on 2 main areas. The first is that we are going to recruit the best and the brightest college graduates, individuals who've graduated from graduate school, or individuals that want to change their career and enter the field of education, to go in and commit at least 2 years to teach in urban and rural low-income schools across the country. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's one of the most important aspects of what we do. And the second is the work that our core members, is what we call our teachers, what our core members do after their 2 years of teaching in the classroom, whether that be staying to teach as teachers in the schools where they've been teaching, whether that be to go on and pursue other work in other fields and continue to be lifelong advocates for education equity. That in and of itself is sort of our mission and our model for theory of change. Our mission is simply that one day all children in this country will have the opportunity to achieve an excellent education. So we approach this in a couple of different ways. The first is by recruitment. So we actively go out and recruit, again, like I said before, the best and the brightest across our colleges and universities. So we invest over a third of our organization's resources to go out to over 450 colleges and universities across the country and talk to students about what it means, what the education gap looks like in our cities, and what it means for our country to have such disparity in its education system. We, this past year, had over 48,000 applicants to participate in Teach for America from over 650 colleges and universities across the country. About 15% of those individuals that applied got into our program. Our selection model has been rigorously developed over the past 20 years to specifically identify the traits of those individuals that we have found most successful in our classrooms. So we're looking primarily for individuals that have a demonstrated track record of leadership. We see teaching as leadership, that the best teachers are those that are willing to take on the responsibilities of their children's education and to invest their families, their community, and their students in towards improving the educational opportunities that exist. There are a couple other areas that I could talk more about, but that's really the key. So from our selection process, we then go through a pretty rigorous training cycle. The most important element of which I would say is our Summer Institute, where for 6 weeks, our teachers go through an intensive training. They get the pedagogical underpinnings of what it means to be a teacher in an urban setting. They are teaching summer school in one of our 8 sites across the country. Our teachers in Greater Boston teach in Philadelphia Public Schools. While they're teaching, it's a constant feedback loop. While they are observing other teachers that are teaching in their small groups, while they're getting feedback on what they're teaching, they're held accountable for the students' results during that summer school time period. But they're also constantly getting the pedagogical elements that are important. So lesson plan design, classroom management, setting big ambitious goals for what they want their students to achieve, and tracking their progress by using assessments. After that time, after the 6 weeks of training, they come and they start into the classroom. And so our teachers are full-time teachers from the fall that they enter the classroom after their summer training, and they commit for 2 years to teach in those schools. While they are teaching in their schools, they get extensive support from us as an organization. So we provide a full-time staff member that provides feedback to them, that mentors them, does classroom observations, and provides just ongoing support. And in addition, in Massachusetts and in nearly all other regions across the country, our teachers are enrolled in a licensure program. So in Massachusetts, we partner with Boston University to provide all of our teachers with an initial license by the end of their 2 years. Most of our teachers also will go on to pursue a master's degree within those 2 years. So that is sort of the backbone of what we do and how we operate as an organization. And just some high-level statistics of what it looks like nationally and what our work looks like in Massachusetts. So over our 20 years, we've had more than 24,000 individuals who have worked as core members. We've had currently this year more than 9,000 teachers working across the country in 42 different sites across the country, and all in urban and rural low-income settings. Here locally in Massachusetts, we're in 6 districts and in about 8 different communities working in charter schools across the state. So we're in Boston, Chelsea, Lawrence, Revere, Fall River, and are looking this next year to grow into New Bedford. We have over 160 teachers that are working in schools in these communities, and have over 60 schools that we partner within those communities. My role within the organization is to help us grow within the state, to become a statewide organization, and to help ensure that our teachers and our core members enter the classroom with the licenses they need, the jobs that they need in order to have the impact that they're going to have, but also that we have a sustainable relationship with all of our partners. So having constant, ongoing partnerships and vertical partnerships across the state. The last piece that I'll talk about is our alumni in Massachusetts. We have over 1,000 alums that have completed their Teach for America core member experience in the state of Massachusetts. We have over 60 school leaders that are alums across the state, and individuals in higher level district positions. Superintendent Jeff Riley, who's named the new receiver of Lawrence Public Schools, is a Teach for America alum. The superintendent of Shrewsbury is a Teach for America alum. But the alumni aspect of our work is very central to what we do as an organization. So regionally, we have 3 individuals, full-time staff members, that work to support our core members as alums. That's the quick overview of what we do. I'd love to answer more questions and talk a little bit more about that as we go on.
Thank you, Tony. I want you to hold the thought for the discussion about what it would take to bring that program here to Worcester.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we do that. Our second speaker is Jesse Sullivan, Executive Director of the Boston Teacher Residency. He's taught middle and high school math for 10 years at the King Open School in Cambridge, Brighton High School, and City on the Hill Public Charter School. While at City on the Hill, he founded the Teachers Institute, a school-based teacher preparation program. He's been an instructor at the Harvard Graduate School of Education and is a national board certified teacher. Mr. Solomon holds a BS in mathematics from MIT and a Master's of Education from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Let us welcome, please, Jesse Solomon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Come on now. I want to first say a little bit about where we come from as an organization and talk about how we go about our work. Very similar to TFA, we start with the basic notion that one of the central promises of our democracy is that every kid and every family should be guaranteed the right to a quality education. And unfortunately, Boston, Worcester, I don't want to speak for Worcester, in Boston and other big cities, that's still too much left to chance, right? You get lucky in a lottery, or you get lucky in a school choice plan, and some kids get that education and some don't. And we are aim to be part of an effort, particularly in Boston, around making sure that every kid has the right to has access to a quality education. The work of the Boston Teacher Residency starts with the notion that the quality of the individual teacher is the single most important internal factor in a school to educational achievement. Having said that, I also want to contradict that, which is to say that while there is all this talk about a sort of human capital approach to education improvement, we also believe that while human capital is probably the most important thing, that it's necessary but not sufficient, and that just focusing on human capital isn't going to get us where we want to go. And so I want to talk a little bit also in what I talk about today about a kind of systems approach and not just an individual approach. And I think probably given the kind of tenor of the national conversation, and you see individual test scores being published by large national newspapers, that thinking about the failure of our educational system to educate all kids to high level just as an individual failure misses the point, that it's a systems failure, probably more so than an individual failure. So I would like to talk about both things. So BTR, the Boston Teacher Residency, is our 9th year. We were started by the Boston Public Schools 9 years ago because the district had a problem. Like many big city districts across the country, Boston did not have a teacher shortage in terms of numbers. We had more applicants, more resumes than jobs. But we had a teacher shortage in terms of high needs areas, math, science, special education, ESL. In terms of teachers of color, Boston is actually still under court order dating back to 1973 in desegregation to have at least 25% of the teachers be African American, statistic we do not currently meet. Boston was losing half of its new teachers in the first 3 years. So you had this revolving door at the front end of the profession in the district. It's hard to build a sustainable teaching force if you're losing half your new people in the first 3 years. But probably most importantly, Boston was not getting the teachers it needed in terms of the skill level and the commitment that it would actually take to educate all kids to high levels, right? And so if you really think about how complex that work is, to take 25 kids coming in with all different things going on, coming in at all different levels, and think about what would it mean to educate all those kids to a high level, the commitment level and the skill level that takes is tremendous, and we were not getting that consistently. So while there were many places providing teachers to the district, surrounding the district, the superintendent at the time, a guy named Tom Payzant, decided we would do it ourselves, so we started BTR. And pretty simply, the model is the best way to think about it is based on the medical residency model. And the notion is to go out there and do the best we can to recruit an incredibly talented, diverse pool of people who not only come in with a sort of content knowledge around their content, but also a commitment to the work of urban teaching and a commitment to schools that we believe, at least in the intake process, will lead them to stay and work in Boston for a number of years. We want to build a sustainable teaching force. The basis of the program is these folks spend a full year, not as a teacher of record, but working with a mentor teacher in a Boston public school, full-time, 4 days a week, really based on the notion that the best way to learn to do this work is at the elbow of someone who really knows what they're doing. Year-long, data-based, reflective conversation, every day going in there thinking about where are our kids, what do they need to learn, what are we going to do differently based on what we learned yesterday. We place people in clusters in schools, and if you allow the medical residency analogy, think of the schools as teaching hospitals. places that are both dedicated to the care and well-being of the kids, but also dedicated to the learning of novices in that setting. And we're really trying to create a set of teaching hospitals within the district. We design and run a set of courses around that full-year internship. These take place in the summers, on Fridays, after school, so people actually get a master's degree through the program. They get licensed through the program, and they commit to teach in Boston for at least 3 years after. So they're making a 4-year commitment up front. We then provide a set of induction supports to them during those 3 years, helping them get their feet under them and get good by the end of the 4 years. To date, about half of our teachers are teachers of color. More than half of them at the secondary level are in math science. About 40% teach either special education or English as a second language. Overall, in our 9 years, about 80% of the teachers are still teaching in Boston. If we don't count people who are teaching outside of Boston because we're biased toward Boston, but it's closer to 90% when you add in those folks. And part of the idea is by the time someone gets through our whole program, this is probably something they want to do, and then we're supporting them to try to get good. So let me come back to the thing I said at the beginning, which is why this isn't enough. I'm overgeneralizing here, but what we see school to school is take a big school, fairly dysfunctional, sprinkle a bunch of good teachers in that school. Unless you're sprinkling a huge number of good teachers in that school, it's very hard for that sprinkling of teachers to change the culture and systematic approach of that school. And we still set up schools the way we have for 100 years. Practice is still too privatized. We still do too much teaching behind closed doors. We don't think about teachers as teams. For the most part, we think about teaching as a set of individuals. And probably most importantly, at least in my mind, we don't come at this with a common set of theories and practices and approaches. We still allow everybody to go into their classroom and kind of do what they think best. Now, that's not to say that we should all be lockstep, but take something like early reading. We actually know enough now about how to teach kids to read that there's really no excuse that the large majority, 95, 97% of kids shouldn't be learning how to read. And yet we still allow for great variety in reading instruction, resulting in, at best, maybe in our best schools, maybe 3/4 read. If you look at the number of kids who are proficient in reading at the end of 3rd grade in Boston, it's 38%. So just over 1 in 3 kids is reading proficiently. You tie that statistic to high school completion and college completion, you're in some ways messing with destiny by not allowing kids to read at grade level by 3rd grade. And so I guess my point in this is, it is about going out there and getting great teachers. It is about their, recruiting, preparing, supporting them. But if we're not doing that as part of a coherent system that's saying, look, we know how to do this work, we're going to teach you how to do the work, and we're going to support you as a team to do this work and implement well, I don't think we're going to get where we want to go without that as well. So hopefully we'll talk about that as we go on. Thanks.
Thank you, Jesse. So far, so good. We have two presenters, and they're all staying a long time. That's the important, a lot of good substance. Eric Howe, you're up next, the Assistant Professor of Science Education here at Assumption College. He earned his BS in Molecular Biology from the University of Colorado, an MBA from Indiana University, a biology degree from Colgate, and a PhD in Science Education from Western Michigan University. His primary interests center on developing, teaching, and researching the efficacy of lessons that incorporate the history and philosophy of science with an emphasis on improving students' nature of science perspectives. It's all yours, Eric.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank the Research Bureau, and it sounds a bit odd. I'd like to thank Assumption College, and given that I live here, that seems a bit strange to say that, but thanks to both groups. I'd like to present a little bit about what our licensure program looks like at Assumption College, and in many respects touch on something that was said before, and that is how we approach this as a coherent system of education. And I think that I should underscore that in terms of what we do here and see if you agree or see if you see it as we try to present it. In this session, I have 4 things, just a little bit about the mission, and I am sensitive to 10 minutes of time, so hook me if need be. The advantages of pursuing a certification through a traditional 4-year program like ours. A little bit of an overview of our programs, And then I had anticipated perhaps that some students would be here, but if any of you would like to go through our program, there are going to be some contacts at the end of this. And I suppose a little bit about our master's program as well, which might apply. So at any rate, the mission and our education concentration, we do strive to prepare students to teach competently at the modern classroom. And I think that builds on what both of the prior speakers have both commented on, and that the modern classroom is a changing beast. And in many respects, it does require what can be a coherent system to deal with the dynamics of individualized instructions, the challenges of ELL, the diversity issues, and then mindful of the subject matter knowledge that needs to be taught, and a whole other cadre of things. And so, of course, we attempt to build that into our system. Our recent graduates are practicing teachers at all levels, elementary, middle, and secondary. They're department chairs, they're school principals. We have graduates here that are in private and public schools, and of course, across the United States by virtue of our reciprocity that we enjoy with a number of locations. The advantages, three principally. One is to develop what we call pedagogical content knowledge, the idea of having multiple structured field-based experiences and the importance of that, and also the idea that our program is aligned with what the state of Massachusetts, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, indicates is what we need to do in terms of having subject matter knowledge and professional standards for teachers. Part and parcel, all of this can be looked at as, thinking about it as the profession of teacher, and all that embodies. Pedagogical content knowledge. It really does embody that the teaching of any discipline, whether it's former science teacher, math teacher, English, history, that there are unique ways of teaching those particular disciplines that we need to train our teachers to prepare for. And so it is the case that a system should be done, that students get instruction into how to teach by virtue of inquiry methods of science, and how that's distinct from perhaps direct instruction approaches or all sorts of other pedagogical techniques for particular disciplines. And so we try to incorporate across the range of the instruction that we have here at the college. We do have subject methods courses that target this proficiency in things like pedagogical content knowledge. And so it's the idea that our students, at whether it's the elementary end or the secondary level, they take methods courses and learn varieties of ways of instructions that are tied to specific disciplines and content. And then, of course, the courses do infuse learning theory. I do want to underscore that this idea of a coherent system we have to pay homage to that, and that we do have learning theory and structure in the way that we want our students to experience a range of ways of teaching, but also it's underlined by a foundation of theory and pedagogy. Structured field experiences that the students have here. There's foundational courses that we have, of course, that have in-school projects and otherwise, where students are exposed early and they're exposed often to being in the classroom. And there's also methods courses that have pre-practicum. We have elementary, there's 3 of them. There's pre-practicum that takes place in math. There's one that takes place in language, social studies, and reading. And then there's also our secondary pre-practicum. And I also ought to mention that these pre-practica, the importance of this is not only as a subject specific, but it's across the range of urban to rural settings and also grade levels. So our students get exposures, perhaps, let's just pick at the elementary level at first grade, and then they'll perhaps have a pre-practicum in the 3rd grade, and then another perhaps at the 6th grade, and in the inner city and in the rural area. And so they get a range of exposure to the types of settings that they may encounter and one day teach. And then, of course, our practicum experience is a student teaching, which most of you probably are familiar with this sort of end experience. This is a 12-week practicum that takes place during the spring of their senior year. Our program is aligned with the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and this is to promote subject matter knowledge and professional standards for teachers. This is the idea that as I say, education advisors, we have the advising system that takes place here at the college is that students are, from the time that they matriculate into our program, we help them to select a schedule of courses that is aligned with the types of things that they should be teaching at the particular discipline where they'll end up. And so if they're a history teacher, we have them take background requisite courses. They're going to help them with the content matter that they're going to one day teach. Advising as well, we help our students to prepare for what will ultimately be the MTEL licensure exams, which is part and parcel based on the content. And then lastly, these professional standards for teachers. Part of what infuses all of our courses at this preparation program is the idea that we help them with with the notion of effective lesson planning, various means of doing lesson delivery, promoting classroom management, student equity, and also what it means to become a professional educator. And all 5 of these are in part in each of the courses that we have throughout their 4 sequences. The overview of our programs, I apologize for the busy slide, but we provide certification or licensure at each of these particular domains, elementary 1 through 6, and then you can see these throughout. It's either at the middle or the secondary level. And also we have a graduate level as well, in special education, and there is a graduate in guidance counseling. In general, students that undergo our program take core classes through the college. At the same time, they can start to take what would be the education courses, and these would be our foundational courses. They can take even some of our methods courses as early as their second year. And as I mentioned, there's the experiences in schools that takes place almost immediately. So we want to get them in the classroom so that they can experience whether or not this is the choice that they would ultimately like to see as a profession. And they take major courses as well. And so while they're taking major courses, they concentrate in elementary or secondary education, and off these courses sort of overlap and count towards both, as it were. For most majors, they apply by their sophomore year. With the exception of secondaries, it's entirely possible for middle secondaries could wait until the junior year to apply. And we're often asked, and I think it's particularly appropriate given this setting, with what about things like other majors like business or economics or otherwise, or perhaps even the late bloomers. And that's important, where I see tremendous value in Teach for America or Boston residency. It's these students that say, look, I didn't know that I wanted to teach until my senior year, and I'm a business major. What do I do? And I think in terms of our program, we do have a minor in education which could apply, and this is taking a sequence of courses, which is roughly 6 courses, 4 in education, 2 that count otherwise, and then they can apply for preliminary licensure through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Or we have a 5th-year program, or really it's an accelerated master's program in special education. And in this case, it's for students who are thinking about a special ed licensure at the pre-K or 5 through 12. And for some of them, they're able to take courses even during their senior year that would count both towards the undergraduate and also for the master's in special ed. And then when they leave here, in terms of special ed, they'd have the BA degree, a master's in special ed. They would have their initial licensure and initial license with teachers of moderate disabilities. And then lastly, contacts for us, which I know this is a bit superfluous, but at any rate, had there been some students here, I would have said, come on down. We're located in the building just over there, and this is just a little bit about us. It is interesting from our program, if I can brag with the probably no time that I have left. One of the things that's unique to Assumption's program, 2 things. The first of which is the subject specificity of our methods courses. It is unique. Very few colleges in Massachusetts, and I dare say, and I'm guessing the United States, have methods courses that are tied to subject disciplines. And that's important for helping to prepare our students for the uniqueness of certain content domains. And the second of which is that most of our faculty, among them up here, not only are they teachers in the education department, but they're content teachers as well. So I teach in the biology department. There are some that teach in the English department, in the history department, and otherwise. So it's a nice infusion of seeing the importance of content, but yet also we're teacher backgrounds, high school teacher, elementary teachers, and we bring that pedagogical experience to bear. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
I might comment while Eric is doing his apparatus. Editorial comment, I guess, that I can make as Chris, as a moderator, as someone who lives over on Chester Hill here, and whose children went through Nelson Place. We benefited greatly from the student internship programs, and believe me, be able to provide students from the local colleges such as Assumption were a great relief for parents in the sense of being able to help. So I would hope you continue to emphasize that's an important part of the community and education. Our last speaker, but not our least, is Sorry Gentlemen, probably our most important speaker, because she's going to react to what we heard and how it applies to Worcester. We're so fortunate to have Tracy O'Connell-Novick with us. She's been a member of our Worcester School Committee since 2010. She currently serves as the vice chair. She is the mother of 3 daughters, all who attend the Worcester Public Schools. She also has a background as an English and a history teacher in high school here in Massachusetts as well as in New Hampshire. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in English Language and Literature from Smith College and a Master of Arts in Teaching from Boston University and their School of Education. Thank you very much, Tracy, for joining us today.
So I think the thanks have been said a number of times, but I want to thank you for having this forum. I think that we're perhaps better served than we often are with panels of this nature, but I do feel that I have to point out that we're once again having a conversation around teaching and educators without anybody who's currently serving as a classroom K-12 teacher. And if you look at the national model right now, we have a lot of conversations going on about education that are not actually involving people who are currently serving as educators. And I think that that is to our detriment as a country and certainly as an educational system. Let me give you, for those of you who aren't necessarily up on the numbers in Worcester, a little bit of perspective on where we are in Worcester. Worcester, as I'm sure you know, is the second largest city in Massachusetts. We serve a student body of 24,000 students. Of those 24,000 students, currently 77% are free and reduced lunch students. To give you an idea of what that means that their families are living, a family of 5 is living on $40,000 a year or less. About 20% are special education students, and about 20% of those are English language learners as well. In some cases, by the way, the last two categories overlap, which gives you some really unique needs to be met. I checked with our human resources department around teacher shortages, because a lot of these conversations, many times are predicated on the notion that we're missing or we have gaps in particular spaces. And in some cases, of course, we reflect what's going on in Boston, which wasn't surprising. Our gaps in terms of where we have fewer applicants than we'd like are in special education, particularly in secondary special education. They are in bilingual special education, and that would be not only in Spanish, which is our primary language spoken, but also in all of the other, somewhere around 72 languages that are spoken by our students. Reading specialists and librarians. So in all cases where we have gaps, we're talking about gaps that are highly specialized, highly trained individuals that we need in order to actually meet the needs of those students. These are really the last places where we need to be having people who are coming fresh out of really anything. We really need to make sure that we have people who are highly trained. One of the things I can speak to from my experience in the school committee is that a major thrust of the district, both with the work that we've been doing with our level 4 schools, for those of you familiar with that, and also with our last teacher's contract, was in increasing and encouraging specialization of teachers to make sure that more of our teachers, not only those who are specifically special education teachers or those who are specifically ELL teachers, but more of our classroom teachers actually have training in those areas, because more and more and more of our teachers are simply dealing with them in regular classrooms. Whether you're talking about mainstreaming special education students or you're talking about students who have needs that we maybe haven't found yet, students who are classified as English language learners, we say that 20% of them are ELL, but they only are ELL for a particular discrete period of time, and then they move out into the mainstream. That doesn't mean that they're fully fluent. That doesn't mean that some of those other needs don't go away. So for our regular classroom teachers to have that training is hugely and crucially important, and that's something that we really value as a district. Now realize, of course, that every time that we go through those trainings, every time that we put professional development together for those teachers, we've made, as a district, an investment in those educators, not only in time, but also, frankly, in terms of money. And every time any of those teachers then walks out our doors and doesn't come back, that's money that we as a district lose. Not only, of course, the resource of the actual teacher and the teacher's experience, but it's actually a monetary investment that is gone, that we will never get back again. I was asked specifically to deal with whether we're getting the best candidates in Worcester, and whether I'm satisfied with current recruitment and retention efforts. And I have to say, in both cases, I would say in some cases and in some schools. And the breadth of research, I did a lot of work, I've done a lot of work on this, but I particularly in the last couple of weeks have done a lot of work on this, clearly shows that the teachers that we need, particularly in high-need urban districts, have a solid theoretical knowledge of education, have a solid pedagogical knowledge of education, and then also have solid classroom experience. Do we always get all three of these in everybody who applies to the Worcester Public Schools? No. Do we endeavor to? Yes, in most cases that we do. And keep in mind that hiring in Worcester is kind of an interesting dance between principals and central administration. So there is some say that's given by principals, there's some say with downtown. There are principals who are looking for particular angles on things. I will say that there certainly are principals who are saying, these are things I have to have in order to actually hire somebody for my school. The largest challenge to urban education, as has already been said, is the revolving door of unqualified teachers. Teachers who come in, there for a year, there for 2 years, and they're gone. So the question that I think faces not only Worcester, but also that Boston's been dealing with and that really the country is dealing with is not only how do you get good people, but how do you keep good people? How do you make sure that they want to stay where they are, that they want to stay with you, and that they want to continue to grow as educators? The things, if you go out and actually ask teachers, first of all, of course, is reasonable pay. If you're going to expect people to come out with master's degrees and so forth, they're going to have graduate degrees, and they're going to need to pay off those bills as well as eventually one supposes support a family. They want to have a notion of solid job satisfaction. They want to feel like they themselves are actually accomplishing something and that they are valued for it. The other thing that they want, and by the way, the interesting thing is that this is particularly true of people who are coming out of what we consider high-powered schools, they want workplace autonomy. They want to have some control over what they actually do. They want to be solving problems. They want to be coming up with their own answers to what's going on, and they want to have their voice heard when there is actually a systems problem that they then can contribute and have it actually be part of the solution to the problem. Now, if you're paying any attention, you may notice that there's actually a growing lack of autonomy nationally when it comes to education. We're having a lot more of decisions made by people who are way up here, who aren't even at my level. We used to complain about school committees. Now we complain about the national board. Now we're complaining about what's going on in Congress. We're complaining about what's going on in the Department of Education. And the voices of the people who actually are saying, here are the people that are in front of me. How do I meet their needs? How do I make sure that they get where they need to go? Are voices that are in no way being heard. The solutions, some of the solutions that I've seen going on locally, and again, these are only local solutions because there's only so much autonomy that we're being given at the local level at this point, is in some of the work that's been going, and not only specifically in the innovation schools, but also some of the conversations that are innovative-like. So if you take, for example, I was in Woodland Academy last spring. In Woodland Academy, they're actually having, for example, their third grade teachers get together. They will go into one of the teachers' classrooms and watch that teacher do a lesson. It's not an evaluation. Then those teachers actually get together and say, okay, how'd the lesson go? What worked? What didn't work? The more that we can do that kind of thing, and the more that those kinds of things then are heard on the next level as, here are the problems that we're having, here are the solutions that we're finding, and here's the support we need from you as administrators, the more that you actually have that feedback loop of people who are valued in their profession, are getting job satisfaction, and are actually being valued not only as the person standing in front of the room, but also the people who have something to contribute to the profession in a greater sense. Again, though, I will say that that only is going to get us so far. So unfortunately, the local solutions can only get us so far. We also need to be having a national conversation that says, these are voices that we need to be hearing. And again, that goes not only for teachers, but also for administrators at the school level. Also the notion of collegial team building. Some of what Mr. Solomon was saying regarding the idea of you never stick a teacher in a classroom and leave that teacher on their own. One of the most valuable things that happened to me when I was teaching, and it was an accident, was that I had a 30-year English teacher who was next door. She was on the other side of my door, and if I needed her, even in the middle of a class, I could knock on that door and she was there. We ate lunch together. She reviewed my lesson plans. She was not paid for it. It was not a formal mentorship program because we weren't there yet. But she was the most valuable thing to me as a new teacher. And I knew that I could take any problem to her, and she would walk me through whether it was something where I needed to go see somebody else in the system, whether it was something that was having to do with what we were actually teaching. And here's the other thing. She came to me when, for example, we all suddenly had to start answering emails. When, for example, we all suddenly had to start doing things online, because there were things that I could contribute to her. And she was smart enough to know that if she came to me, then this actually became an exchange. The more that we can build those sorts of relationships within our schools and not make these relationships where people are pitted against each other. My score is better than your score, my kids do better than your kids. That's actually detrimental not only to the profession, but it's detrimental to the kids. It doesn't actually improve the way that the schools are functioning for the kids that are in them. I will say that I see a few, and I stress the word few, bright spots in the new teacher evaluation system along this line, only insofar as there is supposed to be a collegial relationship going on when it comes to the goals that teachers are setting for themselves. And there's supposed to be a conversation going on between the teacher and the administrator about what those goals are and how they're being met. Now, much like any theory that's written down, that's only going to work so long as that relationship actually is collegial and there's a back and forth. When the rubber meets the road, we'll see how that happens. If that actually is what's happening, we may actually be able to see some of this sort of boat building going on. My hope also is that then we're actually seeing administrators who are wise enough to pull from their own staff and say, hey, she's having this challenge, why don't you go meet with her? Why don't you go see what she's doing? The more that you can do that, the stronger we can actually make our educational system. I was also asked if Teach for America or the Boston Residency Program should be introduced in Worcester. So I want to point out, first of all, and I think you've already gotten this, I think, from the presentations, that those are two very different questions. Those are two very different programs. I should first admit, I guess, that when I graduated from Smith in 1994, I went to a Teach for America presentation. I was coming out of college, I had a bachelor's degree, graduating with pretty good grades from a Seven Sisters school. I was pretty much what they were looking for. Took their materials home to my dorm room and sat on my bed and shook my head and said, my God, I am gonna need more than 6 weeks in order to be able to do this. I will say that that's probably one of the smartest things I ever did. So you cannot train someone to be an educator in 6 weeks. You cannot give them the pedagogical and theoretical knowledge they need in order to be an educator in 6 weeks, even if you do weekend and night supports, which any of us should be doing anyway, period. That should be true of anybody who's new to the system. We are doing a disservice to anyone who does this, but we moreover are doing a disservice to the students that are in those classrooms. One of the most telling pieces of material that I found online was from a TFA alum who said that, in his opinion, anyone who taught for 2 years for Teach for America automatically owed their district another third year in order to make up for the kids that they'd screwed up in the first year. As a first-year teacher, you already know how shaky you are your first year, and that's after you've been through student teaching and probably made all kinds of screw-ups with the actual master teacher in the room. That's with all of the other knowledge that's actually already under your belt from having gotten the theoretical and pedagogical knowledge. You can't do this based on that. Now, the Boston Teacher Residency Program, different kettle of fish. There's a couple of things that are going there that are absolutely appropriate. First of all, we're not sticking a recent college graduate in a room with 6 weeks of training under their belt. We're not doing them the disservice, we're not doing the kids the disservice. Secondly, that apprenticeship with a classroom teacher is really important. Also, the apprenticeship with the classroom teacher taking place at the same time that the classes are taking place is also really important because the two things relate to each other. You need to say, I had this happening in the classroom, and take it back and talk about the pedagogy. You need to take the pedagogy and go out the next week and apply it. You need to be able to take the theory of instruction that you're talking about, whether it's Montessori or Holt or Dewey, and actually then go say, stand in front of 25 kids and see how that works. The other thing is that Boston is actually attempting to meet its own needs and make sure that they are functioning as a commitment to that particular community. We don't need people who are in this for the short term, we need people who are in this for the long haul because it serves our kids better that way. The other thing is that they're focusing on special education and English language learning, which we know are high needs in terms of any urban district. There are a couple of problems that I have or I see from what I've learned about the program. One is this ongoing craziness that I think we have in too many of our urban districts, which is this data-driven process that we all need to be judged by how the MCAS scores are doing. The notion that you can take any kid and progress every single kid a year and a half every single year and every single teacher can do that, no. The other thing is that I think that there are some lacks in terms of the actual master's program in child development and in educational theory. Those are obviously a little bit wigglier than the question of how you actually are driving the program. The thing I'll say in terms of Worcester, in terms of things that we have that are similar, that are not functioning in that formal session, the Clark Masters of Arts in Teaching program, for example, actually sends kids to South. Obviously, we have kids in almost all of our schools in one way or another, whether they're from Assumption or Holy Cross or elsewhere, that are serving some of their internships in our public education, in our public schools. But I will say that in terms of if what we're talking about is actually attracting and retaining teachers, changing the profession or changing the conversation such that we're talking about autonomy, such that we're talking about investment and valuing the professionals that are in the schools. And also for our new teachers, the more that we can make this a question of mentorship, and not only individual mentorship, but community mentorship. That's what's actually going to best serve not only our teachers, but also our students. And I am sure that I have gone over my time.